Hey everybody, so this is it, Election Day 2024. We finally made it. We're finally going to get some answers. We've got a live stream coming up today starting at 5:30 Eastern, 1:30 Pacific. This final video is going to take one last look at where things are at and give you a bunch of Election Day resources. So we're going to go real quick and start here on Real Clear Politics and look at the 7 battleground states. Here Trump is ahead by 0.8. Harris is ahead in Wisconsin and Michigan, and Trump leads in the other 5. The last 2 times Trump has been on the ballot, he has been clearly underestimated in the polling. If that happens again at all this time, he's going to win rather comfortably. But if it goes in the other direction, it could be Harris that's potentially sweeping these states. Now, what about the national popular vote? On 538, they've got Harris ahead by 1.2, 48 to 46.8. That's also a precarious lead there for Harris. She's expected to win the popular vote, but it's unclear if that kind of a margin would translate into an electoral college win. What about the final 538 projection? Well, it's basically dead even at 50-50, but they did update it to give Harris the ever so slight advantage of 50 to 49 with 1 tie. Even if it was something like 60 to 40 one way or the other, that's only a small lead. All you have to do is think back in your life when you had a 60% chance of having something good happen. How many times did that not pan out? Probably a bunch. But this is not that. This is dead even. In the end, it could be a landslide, and this 50-50 stuff is going to look kind of silly. What about in the Senate? Well, they've got Republicans at a 92% chance of winning it, 8% for the Dems. That is rather overwhelming, but also not a total guarantee. You might remember back in 2016, some outlets said Hillary Clinton had a 90+% chance of winning, and that ended up not panning out. What about in the U.S. House? That's much closer. Here it's the same situation as president. The tiniest advantage for the Dems, 51 to 49. So it's a pure coin flip, and it's totally up for grabs. Now, what about the markets? Let's take one last look here at Polymarket. Here Trump is at about 61% favored. Harris is at about 39. Still, do not put all your stock into the markets. They can get spooked easily, and there's also no guarantees. But in the battleground states, Harris is ahead in Michigan and slightly in Wisconsin. Trump leads in all the rest, including in Nevada, where it's an extremely narrow lead. Well, maybe you're more into predict it. Well, that one is much closer. Trump is only ahead there by 4 cents, 54 to 50. It's pretty much yet again another dead even tie. So some people claim they know what's going to happen, but I think that's just wishful thinking. We have come a long way in this election. We've seen tons of crazy events. We've seen Kennedy supporting Trump, Cheney supporting Harris, assassination attempts, candidate changes. It's pretty much been the wildest ride you can imagine. Hopefully we get the results in time, and hopefully there's not too much unrest. So that's a look at the final status of the race. Now let's move on and take a look at some of the other final resources. And as always, all these links will be down below in the description. So first we've got the poll closing times. On this map, you can hover over every county and you can see what time the polls are going to close. Some states are in more than one time zone, but the earliest is going to be 6 p.m. Eastern. And I'm sure in some of these states, and even down to a county level, everybody's going to be paying close attention to the margins to possibly try to predict a winner super early in the night. Now after that, how long until we get the results? Well, here's the 7 battleground states. Some of them are going to be quicker, as some of them like Arizona and Nevada could take days. Now, of course, there's going to be less mail-in ballots in this election, so I'd like to think it would be quicker than in 2020. But if it's an extremely close result in any of these states, which is expected, then it's obviously going to take longer until we get a final call. So there's some good data here that shows you how quickly the votes were counted in 2020 and 2022 in these battleground states. As always, it doesn't mean it's going to be the same this time, but it does give you a little bit of an expectation. Now, what about the early vote returns so far? Well, here we've got the data from TargetSmart, and this compares 2020 through the last midterms up until this election. And you've got some different filters here on the side. Now, some people put a lot of weight on these early vote returns. Personally, I don't pay much attention to it because it's not the final result, and we just don't know how these people actually voted. I've seen a lot of talk about how Republican early voting has been up compared to the last election, and for Democrats it's been down. That's obviously a good sign for the Republicans, but we just don't know who's going to turn out on election day. So if you're into the early and absentee data, it's going to be right here. You could also use it here on NBC News, but they also get their data from TargetSmart, so it's just a different way to look at the same thing. I do think this map is a little bit easier to see the data, and it has a little bit easier functionality. I would just encourage people to not get so hung up on the early vote data. Maybe it pans out, maybe it doesn't. Now next we're going to glance over potential polling errors. This Newsweek article shows how they were off in 2016 and 2020, and they were off in the direction of underestimating Trump's support. So this article goes into if pollsters have actually made the appropriate corrections. Now given these are the pros, you'd like to have thought that in 2016 they pretty much knew what they were doing at that time, but then certainly by 2020 I would also like to think that they made the necessary corrections. So who knows what it's going to be this time. They could underestimate Trump again by a smaller margin. They could underestimate Harris. I'd like to think that from their perspective they do want to be accurate on the polling. If they don't, they're going to look like total idiots again after this election. So there's always going to be some polls that favor one side or the other. And I'd like to think that a pollster is not going to specifically weight the data in a way that's going to be favorable to a specific candidate. Some people think that happens, and that's why you've always got to take a look at the aggregate. Now let's move on to ballot measures, and Ballotpedia has a comprehensive list. This will break it down in every state and tell you more about the specific issue. And on pretty much all of these, you can click and get an even more detailed breakdown. So there's a ton of data here. If you want to focus on maybe some of the highlights, they also have the top 15 ballot measures to watch. Some of them are on citizenship, abortion, ranked choice voting, redistricting, energy, etc. I know Democrats are bullish on the issue of abortion driving their turnout in some of these states, especially in Florida. And generally, I agree that most voters do not want to see harsh restrictions on abortion. So I do think anything involving less restrictions is most likely to win. In Florida, though, you do need 60% of the vote to amend their state constitution, and it's anybody's guess as to how much those specific issues would help Democrats down ballot or even at the top of the ticket. Some people might come out just for that issue and nothing else. Others might come out for that and also still support Republican candidates. But if you'd rather use Wikipedia, you can get a similar list right here. This again helps you view the data in a different way. There's some easy to follow tables with some background information and even some shading. So all that data is there, but let's move on to the down-ballot races. Now this is going to be beyond the U.S. House and Senate. Here's what we're looking at for statewide races. Obviously, we've got some governor's races happening, but also Attorney General, Secretary of State, State Treasurer, and the state legislatures. There's a ton of info here. You can click on all of these and get a more detailed breakdown. And also on an even more local level, you've got elections for mayor happening in several major cities. Some of them already happened earlier in the year, but there's still a bunch more coming up. So obviously take a look at these if you're in these cities or if you're interested in these races. We've also got the state Supreme Court elections. This article from Bolts is from earlier in the year, but they have updated some of the races if you scroll down. It shows you where they're having elections for state Supreme Court and states where the ideological balance is at stake. That looks like it's going to be Michigan and Ohio. But if you go down even farther, they go way into detail on the specific states. It's way too much information to cover. But again, if you're from these states, this could be highly noteworthy. And then we'll wrap it up here on the battle for the state legislature. Larry Sabato breaks down the chambers in each state. In some of them, the partisan balance is going to be up for grabs. Some states to watch might be Arizona, New Hampshire, Michigan, Minnesota, and Pennsylvania. Again, they go into much more detail down below. So aside from the race for president and then Senate, House, and governor, there's a whole lot more happening behind the scenes in pretty much every state. I'm sure there's going to be at least one or two crazy upset in some of these states, but that's where we're at on the final resources for this election. I really don't know what's going to happen, but neither does anybody else. We're going to get those answers tonight. Come by for that stream. In the meantime, let me know in the comments. What do you think about any of the final polling or any of these final resources? Is anybody going into this election with momentum? Who's going to win control of Congress? What about the early vote, the polling accuracy, or any of the ballot measures? Which down-ballot races are you taking a look at the most? Let me know down below on your way out. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join if you'd like to support the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.